Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We are there today for the second and final Hangout session of this MOOC on communicating corporate social responsibility. Today I have the pleasure to welcome Catherine Janssen, professor at ESX School of Management, that you already met in some of the videos about the communication of CSR. Odile Le Désert, that you already saw during the last Hangout session, that is the Nestlé representative of our session today. And finally, Jacques François, that is a specialist of strategic communication that you already met also during different videos. So we are there all together today to discuss the topic of CSR communication, the second part of our MOOC. So I will directly use the questions that you kindly gave us on the discussion forum. So we will begin directly by a very broad but very important question that is about how to design a good CSR message. What is the content and tone that should be used to communicate about CSR? Jacques François, I think you have a position about this question.
Yes, certainly. First, what I would like to say is that CSR communication is not fundamentally different from classical communication. In the classical communication, I mean whatever is related to selling commercial products or services. For me, the main difference is that in CSR communication, content must be prioritized on design and on form. Because the nature of the communication makes that you have to put the emphasis on information, dialogue, and interaction between the people, what is not necessarily the case when you are selling detergents or lemonades or fast-moving consumer goods. And therefore, the priority should be given to the content of the message and not necessarily the design and the form of the message. But I would like also to point out that it's not because you prioritize the content that you should become boring when you're presenting the message. And that does not exclude humor, which will be the object of the subject of the next question. It doesn't exclude agreement and the pleasure for people who are reading or viewing this information. So content should be prioritized, and that will also have consequences as far as the channel choice is concerned, and where necessary from the print, digital communication and maybe social networks should be prioritized as well.
Okay, do you want to add something, Catherine?
Sure. So I think I agree with what has been said right now. I think indeed there is no one best way to communicate about CSR either. The difference, I would say the main difference with CSR communication is that it can raise sensitivities, and in that sense, there's many things that need to be taken into account, the sensitivity of the people with whom you communicate and so on. So I think there's no one best way. There's many guidelines that you have in the MOOC that have been provided in terms of what to communicate, so indeed needs to provide information, also be clear about the motives of the company with regards to what they're doing in terms of CSR. And for the tone, there's many things we'll talk about that a bit more in detail, perhaps other questions, but it shouldn't be that much difference. There's no clear best thing to do, but it should indeed perhaps break through the clutter a little bit to try to get people's attention, to be able to communicate with people.
Okay. Odile, can you give us some ideas about how message about CSR are designed at Nestlé, even though I know you are not the communication manager of Nestlé?
It is a very complex question because the problem is the subject is very complex. In a company like Nestlé, which is considering the size of its operations, the geographical scope of its operations, all the different types of products, activities that we have, our issue is more, how to select and what we want to say and what we want to communicate rather than content. There's like masses of content. And so how to avoid creating huge, huge books, reviews, etc. about everything we do when it becomes a catalog, and how to focus the message is something essential.
Okay. So if I summarize what you have said, I think it's important to give information, not to be always in a mode that is just fun and so on. It doesn't mean that we cannot use fun to give information, but we have to say something. But we still have to select what we are saying. It's not the idea to make a full list of all the activities and that will bring additional questions and concerns in the people receiving the message. But in the MOOC, we also said it's important to be coherent. And some people ask questions about the coherence. How to be coherent between different messages sent through different channels to different stakeholders that have different expectations. So in one way, we want to give the people the information they look for, but on the other hand, we need to stay coherent in what we are saying to different people. How to take this challenge into account? Jacques?
Yes, this is a complex question again. What I would like to say is one of the big diseases of the world of communication today, and this encompasses as well CSR communication as classical communication, is that we have people who are highly specialized in various areas. You have specialists about social networks, you have PR specialists, you have specialists about buying TV commercials, you have specialists in outdoor, but no one has a clear vision of what the role of each communication channel should be in transmitting the identity, the positioning, and the personality of the company. And this is mainly a question of establishing a clear strategy before we go over to determining which sort of message we are going to transmit through TV or through public relations or through lobbying. First, we have to determine what is the identity of the company, what's the positioning of the company, to whom do we want to transmit this identity, and what are the goals of each selected channels, as well on the cognitive, affective, and behavioral field. And from that moment on, we should determine what's the clear role of each channel: mass media, PR, social networks, below the line, lobbying, direct marketing, and so on. And I think that's mainly a question of having a clear strategy and not going immediately to determine, oh, we would like to make to use social networks, or we want to make a big PR campaign. No, I think that's the big problem today.
Probably some other people have something to say about this question, but directly I have a question based on what you have said. So we need to think about what we are doing to prepare a strategy. It takes time, it asks for reflection and so on. But on the other hand, when a crisis happens, when there is a problem and you have to react quickly, how to be in strategic mode and at the same time react directly to the crisis?
Well, I'm not that specialized in crisis management because managing crisis is something very specific that requires specific skills also. So I'm saying myself that in that area we need to have we need to have specialized people to do that. So I don't have a clear view on
but we can probably consider that this strategy that has been put into place will help in case of a crisis, because you know exactly what is your identity, you know what you want to say, so it should help in dealing with the crisis topic.
Yes, again, that's one. But from the moment that you have a clear strategy for the company, a clear definition of what your positioning is, of course, you are ready to face crisis situation in an easier way that if you have to react immediately because you never thought about that before. So from now that you have a strategy, you should know what to do in case of a crisis, of course.
even though a crisis is an unanticipated event, you should be prepared to manage an anticipated event. I suppose this is something you have clearly the habit to manage it.
Yes, we have the habit. We also know that there are always surprises. Okay, if I take, I think I've mentioned previously the example of the Kit Kat palm oil crisis in Indonesia. When Greenpeace, launched the campaign against Kit Kat using palm oil, that was 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I think. Actually, we had been engaged with Greenpeace to discuss about the subject. We had already put in place a number of action plans to try to solve this issue. It's always very difficult to solve an issue in one day. We had a plan, we had some commitments, we knew where we were going. So that was very helpful in responding to the crisis, because we immediately had responses. So this was good. What we were more surprised about is, first, we didn't expect a campaign from a NGO that we considered a partner on this issue, but this is also a fair game, so it's fine. We have to accept this. We were also not prepared on the social media dimension. We still hadn't. Things are moving so fast in this area. We were not prepared to react quickly, to have very immediately answers, and so on. So this is something on which, based on this experience, we have learned to be more reactive, to be faster, to put out a message, and so on. But to go back to the question of crisis communication, the more you engage with your stakeholders, the more you're prepared for possible surprises, and when the surprises happen, the better armed you are to respond to it.
Okay. So then you mentioned social media. I think it was an important topic that we touched in the group, definitely. And we receive a lot of questions about how to use social media. The first question is about how to use social media in a positive way, because people have the feeling that social media, as in the case you mentioned, is used to criticize, to propose boycotts and so on, but we already see in some of the data collection that we propose to you in different opinion polls that people are also using a lot social media to share positive news and to discuss about the activities of companies. So the questions of some of the participants were related to what makes, how to make people use this social media tool in a positive way in connection with companies and their CSR practices. Do you have some tips or recommendations about how to use this tool? Jacques?
As far as social media are concerned, I think that the first condition is when you have social media, and I think especially to Facebook, I think that the topic of community management is of crucial importance. And community management is not a question of amateurism. I know plenty of companies who decide to use social media because it's cheaper, because for them, in their view, and this is a wrong view, there is no cost associated to using social network, because it's easy, they say, to delegate the management, the community management of a Facebook page to a secretary or an assistant on his job description, and he has time to answer or to react. And that indeed, this is a big mistake, because as far as CSR is concerned, the quality, the continuity of the interaction and the dialogue that you have with people is of crucial importance. I mean, you can't allow to answer or to react to some posts of the people 2 days later or a few hours later because you didn't have time to react. You have to react immediately. You must be continuously listening to what people say, or to be prepared to address criticism you receive. And that requires, and this is a second condition, that people must have a perfect knowledge of the company, and they must be prepared to accept any criticism and be prepared to address it in a positive way by having arguments that are ready to be presented and not asking a secretary to address that, because I've seen that so many times. And that is affecting negatively the image of the company. Because when someone asks a question in the CSR area, he expects to have a honest, ethical, and exhaustive answer. Otherwise, that will have negative consequences for his perception of the company.
Yeah, and I think that beyond reacting to what people are saying on social media, which is a very important part, I think that as part of CSR communication strategy, companies can also create content and, for instance, to try to engage stakeholders more in the CSR activities. So, for instance, try to have people select or comment on the current activities to really try to engage them in what the company is developing. And I know there's examples also, it can also be used to raise awareness in terms of positive way of using social media. To raise awareness about social issues. There is companies that have developed games, for instance, on Facebook or on their websites, on blogs, just to engage a bit more and raise awareness about the issues with the stakeholders. So I think there's still a lot of things to learn about how to use social media properly in terms of CSR and CSR communication. But as part of the positive strategy, communication strategy, there's different things that can be done.
Okay, and then an important question that has been asked by one of you is also how to measure the return on investment on social media. Big question. I think this is a topic of one of your class, Jacques, so
yes.
You can maybe highlight some important element there.
Yes, there are two topics related to this question of measuring the results of CSR. First is recruitment. This is the first goal of using social media. Recruiting fans or recruiting people. First goal. Second goal, and I think that in the case of CSR, it's for me the most important, it's to stimulate engagement from the people. And therefore, measuring tools that we will use in CSR will have to be able to measure the engagement and the quality of engagement, and to be even more accurate in that. To measure recruitment, if I'm taking Facebook, for instance, the number of fans is one of those criteria to measure recruitment. But from the moment that we have to measure engagement, we have to use tools that are able to measure this quality in intensity of engagement. And in that case, I would recommend and prioritize qualitative tools like number of subscriptions, number of how many people clicked on newsletters, measuring conversion ratios, analyzing the number of videos and pictures posted. Because you can expect that someone who's engaged to your company will be ready to invest some time, and of course, someone who takes some time to post a video and to post pictures, we can assume that this is a person who is committed to your company. Otherwise, it would be some sort of masochist. Why should I spend 15 minutes or 20 minutes in posting a video if I'm not interested and committed to some extent to the company?
Okay. Okay, another topic that is of course connected to what we discussed is a specific topic that we discussed about in relation to greenwashing issues. When we discuss about is it good or not to exaggerate what you were saying in terms of CSR. Explain if you have a company that is saying that they are in the process of developing a certain activity, but at the end of the day, the moment where they communicate this information, they were just at the beginning of the path, everything needs to be done. Is it greenwashing, or could it be a positive way to motivate companies to go in the right direction? I think you discussed this issue in one of your videos. Maybe you can explain a little bit this exaggeration positive aspects.
Yeah, So indeed, I think exaggeration, it shouldn't be complete exaggeration. It shouldn't be like exaggerating by lying about what the company is doing. But about the fact, for instance, that the oil company communicates about wind turbines, for instance, it can just be a way to communicate that they're on the way of developing cleaner energy, for instance. And so it's kind of setting goals, and by communicating them, saying, okay, we'll do whatever we can to reach those goals. So in terms of exaggeration, it shouldn't be lying, but it can be a way to say, okay, now we communicate about that, so we have to actually reach those goals, otherwise it won't be good for us. So I think exaggeration should be, it's exaggeration. It shouldn't be too much exaggeration, but it can really be a way to move forward with the activities.
So in one way, we could say it's more communicating about commitments than past actions that are already done. I think that's something you can comment to, Adine.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of CSR, what companies were doing is that they were communicating all the good things that they were doing. And well, that's good, but you know, it can get boring, as you were mentioning, because it becomes a catalog of things that we've done, and you know, in a way, who cares? Because people want to look at the future and what we will accomplish in the future. So we've shifted in the last, I think, 4 years to really think communicating in terms of commitments. So we commit to stop using trans fatty acids in our product by, I can't remember the date, 2013, 2014, 2015, or we commit to provide X thousands of pamphlets of coffee to farmers by this date, etc., etc. So we commit to reduce the quantity of sugar in our cereals over 10 years by 25%. So it's really speaking to commitment. And this is where, in a way, I kind of, the term exaggeration is the wrong, I'm sorry, it's a little bit the wrong term, but what is important is it has to be ambitious. If we have to communicate about a commitment, and we communicate something that we already do, that's very easy, I mean, what is the point? We really need to be ambitious. So this is, I think ambition is probably a better word to describe this.
So, okay, to summarize on this topic, so it's not to lie, that is a recommendation that Catherine did, and not at all. It's not neither to say only the positive actions that you have already done in the past, but it's communicate about your future action, your commitment, your engagement. So it's in that way that we were discussing these exaggerations in the book. I hope it is clear like that. And then we can move to another question that has been asked. We discussed a lot to now from more an external perspective of the communication, but what about the people inside the company? How to communicate with them about CSR? And is it necessary to communicate with them? Maybe Odile, since you are the HR manager, it's definitely connected to your function. So what do you think about that issue?
Well, first, I would say that one of the first stakeholders that we have as a company is our own employees. And they're at the same time stakeholders and they're ambassadors. And the more coherent and congruent we are between the expressed values of the company and the values of the people that work in the company and the way they express them and the way they act around it, the better it is. The more authentic, the more solid, the more sustainable your policies are. So definitely we have to communicate about CSR to employees. One of the issues that we have at Nestle is that, again, it's such a dense subject. There's so many aspects that it's difficult to integrate all of them. So we try to mix a kind of general communication through our internal newsletters, our internet, conferences, lunch conference that we do, presentations in our town hall meeting where we talk about different initiatives that we have in certain areas. And then in a given business, of course, the people who work for a certain business, they are always very much aware of what are the key issues that touch that business. And there they will reach a more specialized knowledge. So if somebody is working in confectionery, they will obviously be much more aware of issues linked to children obesity, child work for the cocoa farming, etc. And they will be very much on top of those questions. But then, in general, we try to spread the message to everybody. But again, it's also more a question of attitude and values and consistency between what we do and how we do it. And so, for instance, one of the big ways we try to raise this is to get teams to discuss together what does this mean for us and what do we do in our job to achieve this. So it's really about how do I as an employee make a difference.
Okay. I think there were also questions about the use of humor to communicate about CSR. That's a topic that we touch from the side of company, that some companies decide recently to use humor to attract attention. We discussed about the conditions to use humor. There are different academic research about this topic. Less research focused on CSR. I think, Catherine, you are developing some research in this field. But some of the participants were asking questions about, do you think that NGOs can use humor to attract attention on some important issues? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think we see examples of NGOs that are using humor in their communication, and I think it's perhaps even easier for NGOs than for companies to use humor, just in the sense that the main risk that I perceive with the use of humor is the risk that the company will be perceived as not taking the issue seriously enough. And it might be less the case in the case of an NGO because they have the credibility towards the issue that they address. They really have, nobody will question the fact that they don't care about the issue behind. So I think that in that sense, for an NGO, it might be a good way to communicate, to de-dramatize a little bit also the way to talk about the issue. I don't see why it shouldn't be credible for an NGO to use. I mean, it couldn't lead to a credible message for an NGO to use humor.
Okay. Jacques, do you have some complimentary comment on this question?
Yes, again, we know from extensive research that humor is a positive element in order to explain the impact of a message. And again, the specificity of CSR communication is that the emphasis is put on information, dialogue, and interaction. And I think that there are two major risks associated to CSR communication. One is the skepticism of people, because CSR, a number of people react by thinking, yeah, but okay, that's greenwashing, and what they say is not necessarily true. You can address that by having strong arguments and the quality of the argumentation. And the other risk is the risk of, and I said it and I will repeat it once because I think it's important, is the risk of getting bored. And the more you inform people, the more the risk that you get boring is increasing. Too much information kills the information. But informing people does not necessarily mean that you can't be attractive. And combining attractiveness with the quality of information, that is what we call television, and that's the job of creative people, to make information attractive. And why couldn't we be attractive in communicating? And humor is one big element explaining why some communications receive bigger impact scores in terms of memorization, attitude, perception, and purchase intention.
Okay. I think we touched all the questions that we received about communication, except maybe the specific questions about the Nespresso case. So we received a question about greenwashing and how to assess the greenwashing. And for instance, we were discussing the typology Greenpeace to identify greenwashing, saying, for instance, the lesser of two evils, such that the claims may be true within the product category, but they seek to distract the consumer from the greater environmental impact of this category. So the idea is to say that according to this typology, if your product has some negative impact, environmental or social impact, by definition, if you communicate something related to CSR about this product category, it would be greenwashing. And some of you comes with the case of the Nespresso capsules, discussing this idea, saying, is it greenwashing, since by definition, and another case was the case of Kit Kats, with the fair trade cocoa, but at the end of the day, Kit Kat is a product that could lead to obesity. So is it greenwashing when we discuss about some CSR actions with respect to those product categories? Odile, do you have some elements?
Well, I think again, it goes to what is the, the consistency and the depth and the width of the way you approach an issue, okay? If you take the case of Nespresso, yes, there are some discussions about the use of aluminum in our packaging. But if you look at the whole chain of sustainability, from farming to delivery to our clients, what we found is that the first source of environmental impact is the agriculture, is the farming of coffee. The second one is the handling of the machine, is the cleaning of the cups, etc., etc. And the aluminum comes as the third element. So yes, there is a lot of focus on the aluminum, but we do believe that the aluminum is the way to get the high quality coffee that we need, because it's the best packaging to preserve from oxidation, from taste altering effects. But we try to use as little as possible, and we try to recycle as much as possible. And we focus on recycling. Why do we do that? Because recycling is about engaging our consumers to do the recycling. We have to communicate widely on this, not as greenwashing, but to change the behaviors of the people. So on this aspects, as I said, we have to communicate. So it's not greenwashing, it is actually trying to make the whole chain product of the product life cycle as healthy as possible. And we work where we put a lot of priority is working with the farmers for sustainable agriculture. If we go to the Kit Kat example also, so basically the question raised is to say, yeah, we use fair trade cocoa, but it's bad for obesity, okay? And so how do we do this together? Well, I think that it's clear to everybody that people are not going to stop eating chocolates and eating snacks, and our motto is good food, good life. It's also about pleasure. So snacks, we know, are not necessarily the best nutrition elements for people, but they're an element of pleasure, they're an element of sharing, of giving, which is quite essential. And so after that, once you've decided that in any case you're not going to prevent people from eating snacks and sugar snacks, how can we make this as sustainable and as good for nutrition as possible? And it's about portion guidance, so we do a lot of that in Nestlé. It's about diminishing the fat and the sugar in our products in a progressive way so that people still like it and enjoy it. It's about constantly comparing our products to other products in the same category to see if not only the taste is better, but the nutritional content is also better. And so it's really the way we handle this is to try to minimize the negative impact and enhance the positive impact.
So I think an important point that you mentioned is also the role of consumers in your CSR strategy. And so it makes, it leads to another question, it's the co-responsibility of all stakeholders. So we receive questions about the companies are doing very bad things and they are acting in an immoral way. What can we do against that? So I think it makes us think to this idea that the companies are not alone to be responsible of the problem and not alone to be responsible to find solutions. That we as consumers, and that's connected to the 6th module of this MOOC, we also have our role to play. So what do you think about how to engage consumers, to take these examples of stakeholders, how to engage consumers in the CSR strategy, in the improvement of social and environmental issues that we discussed about?
Well, I think that one of the aspects of CSR communication is indeed to perhaps try to change behaviors, not by saying, okay, you have to change your behavior, but seeing a company, like if the company communicates about CSR activities in a credible manner, it can actually encourage consumers to say, okay, perhaps I should also myself do something, or for instance, buy more responsible products and things like that. So that's one aspect, I would say. And indeed, I think that consumers themselves, by the choice that they make in terms of what they buy, or why not to buy and so on, have a role. So the company is not alone in terms of being responsible or not. It's also a matter of what we as consumers ask of companies. We always request a lower price, but then can we really expect for the product to be the most responsible? And so on. So I think that's the co-responsibility that you were mentioning is part of it.
Okay, but we observed, as we said, a high attitude behavior gap. So people say they want to help the planet to feel better, wants to behave in a more responsible way. But when we observe their real behaviors, when we observe how real behaviors, we see a big gap with what we are saying. So how is it possible? What are the source that explain this attitude behavior gap?
Well, I think that some elements were mentioned already in the MOOC. I think there's many factors that can affect whether or not, even though we would like to be responsible, we don't really necessarily buy the responsible, always the responsible products. And I think it's part of our human nature in a way. So I think better information, so I think that's why the topic of this MOOC is very important, like awareness of possibilities, what is available for consumers is important. Information and yeah, there's many different factors. I don't know if there's anything specific that you would like me to discuss.
Okay. So in one point,
I think what is important in this area is that we have to go beyond the notion of CSR as a separate subject of communication. It's about the product strategy that a company has. How do we make this product strategy as responsible as possible? And how, in our communication, our product communication or brand communication to consumers, we help them also come to a behavior that will be more consistent with their citizens' good, because we're all weak creatures, we know that. So, for instance, if I take the example of Herta, which is a brand which is distributed in France and Germany and in Belgium, not necessarily in other areas of the world, but basically it sells ham, a number of products which are derived from pork, also dough, cake dough, etc. We have been focusing for the last few years enormously our communication around children and eating vegetables. And so all our communication will try to show to mothers how to use ham and other such, it can be chicken ham or other such products in association with vegetables in a playful way, which will make your kid eat the vegetables that otherwise they would completely reject. So it's part of the product strategy. It's not a sort of separate CSR message.
I think it's an important point that comes back that makes the loop in the MOOC, because we discussed about CSR in the first modules, where we were discussing the fact that CSR is not an add-on, it's really a new way of thinking and practicing your business and reinventing your business models, thinking about your products. I think we arrived already at the end of this session. I think there is one important topic also that about which we received some questions to finish, and then we will do some sort of conclusion. It's about the boycott issues. So in the last module, we were discussing about some collective actions of consumers, and one of the most well-known way consumers can behave with respect to companies is deciding to boycott some products. Then we receive questions about what are the effects of boycotts. Do you have answers about, is it really effective? Does it impact companies? Maybe Odile, I think Nestlé has already managed a lot of boycotts. So what are the impacts of boycotts on your activities?
Well, yeah, the different boycotts, some are big, some are small, some pass quickly, some are very big and have to be really fully taken into account. I think in the history of Nestlé, it's actually part of almost, it's become part almost of our DNA. In the 1970s, we were confronted with a huge boycott around infant formulas, which were considered as harmful, being marketed in a too aggressive way against a mother's milk. And we have had to learn the hard way how the boycott can affect you. In some countries, our infant nutrition business is still very low because of the boycotts that started almost 40 years ago, something like this. So yes, boycotts can be extremely harmful, and the effect can last a really long time. So it's really important. And what is the most important thing is how we react to a boycott. And the first thing, and the first element is that if consumers decide to boycott a product, we have to assume that they have a good reason for this, and that they are right to do it. If we don't start from this attitude, then it becomes a kind of, direct confrontation, and it can only escalate. So the first thing is engage with them, with the stakeholders, understand where the problem comes from, try to see what kind of actions we can take them with the NGOs, with the stakeholders, so that it's credible, it's sustainable, and this is the best way to deal with the boycott. But never start by saying you're wrong, you're right.
Okay, thank you. So I will ask all of you two last questions. I would say, I think it should be good maybe to summarize what are, according to you, the good tips or recommendations that you want to formulate when it comes to CSR communication. In a few words, just what to remember about how to communicate the best way possible about CSR. And the last point, do not hesitate to raise some issues that maybe you want to raise that we did not raise yet during this session. Jacques?
For me, it's very simple. Make communication strategy by clearly defining what positioning transmits to the target people. Let's clearly identify who are we communicating to, so this is about targeting. Which channels do we want to use in order to transmit this positioning, and what would be the specific role of each selected channel? For me, it's that simple.
Okay, thank you. Catherine?
Okay, well, I would say that next to that, so indeed the content and so on is important, so be as informative as possible, but as we mentioned it earlier, also try to be innovative in the way the company looks at its communication. It shouldn't be boring, so perhaps try to break through the clutter as well, because when consumers and other stakeholders receive a lot of information every day. So I think that if the communication, if we want communication to have an impact, it has to somehow break letters. And so for me, it's being innovative and trying new things as well in terms of how we communicate about these topics.
Okay, Odile?
Well, I'll speak as the HR manager again. I think as part of your strategy, and even before you even have a strategy, think about your employees as the co-developers, co-owners, co-responsible of your CSR strategy. So make them aware, make them engage, and this means, again, this is not just a newsletter article, this is about engaging with them, dialoguing, having dialogue with them, having them think of some area of work around your key CSR issues. So leverage your employees. If you're not consistent already at that level, then all the rest cannot follow.
Okay, thank you. So we are at the end. I see that we are not that many to follow in live this session, but I hope you will have the opportunity to see it afterwards. As last time, we will propose you a summary of the main topics we have discussed together today. And of course, you still have time to ask questions on the different discussion forum, in which Barbara and myself try to answer as soon as we can. As not that good community manager, maybe we have to be more available, but it's not that easy. But we will try to apply your recommendation for this community management. Two final points that I want to mention. Do not forget your final assignment. That's the final deadline of the MOOC. So you have to give us this final assignment through the means that have been proposed on the MOOC. Do not forget then to be cute enough to read also the final assignment that will be given to you as a peer-to-peer review based on the 12 or 11 or 12 criteria that we propose you to assess other works. I think it will be very interesting for you to discover what other participants have said about different types of companies. And of course, all this work, for those who are okay with that, we will also propose you to put all those information online so you can have a look to the different topics. And finally, and that's something we will give you more information about, we will launch the second edition of this MOOC very soon, probably beginning of June, in a self-paced mode. So it means that you will have all the time you want between June and December to do all the assignments and to listen to all the videos and ask your questions. So for those who don't have the opportunity, unfortunately, to finish the final assignment for next week, do not hesitate to register to the second edition to be able to do that. And of course, do not hesitate to talk about this MOOC to your friends and relatives to make them come to this second edition. So I will discuss with you further in the discussion forum, but I think for today I just have to thank all my colleagues here to be there to discuss with you. And one more time, do not hesitate to give us feedbacks about this session also in the book. And I also thank Barbara for the technical issues, and we are really sorry that we begin with some delay because of that, but that's the technology, it happens. Thank you all and see you soon. Bye.